All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome, everyone, to Lunch and Learn today. I don't believe we have any pre-submitted questions, so I'll just start off right off the bat. If you have any questions, first of all, thank you all for joining, but please post any questions that you do have in the chat, in the Q&A, so we can go ahead and get them answered to the best of our abilities today. So if you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A. Otherwise, we'll kind of go ahead through some of the usual things and point out a couple important notes before we get to checking on those questions. So I'm Jeremy, one of the trainers. You probably see me for those of you that are regulars here and there doing this, but I am here to lead Lunch and Learn today. So just a couple quick things to kind of check out. Always check out our YouTube channel. We post our videos up there, at least a little bit each week when we can. So you should be able to check out some pretty cool stuff on there. Videos over steps, other concepts, some neat things. You can also check out our solutions marketplace. Great place to take a quick look and learn a little bit about different applications and things that you could utilize in your system, or maybe even just give you a little bit of inspiration if you're looking for something to work a little similar, and you want to kind of get some ideas. Maybe one of those things is right for you. And then the last thing is we have a number of events coming up, so we want to highlight those real quick as well. Um, so there is going to be another Submerse virtual Submerse in May. So you can sign up for that at decisions.com/events. We've got a webinar coming up in April on April 10th. So that's another thing that we can check up. And then we are also bringing back our product roadmap sessions. So you can register for those sessions as well. Every other Tuesday, great place to kind of get an idea of where we're going and different things that Decisions has coming up. So if there's something that interests you, definitely check out decisions.com/events, and you can easily register for any of these things if you looking to get some good information out of them. So um, definitely check those things out. Otherwise, we can go ahead and jump into things. We do have one question from Robert Sharp, so we will start with that. And then if anyone else has any questions, please feel free to add so that we can discuss what we can discuss. All right, so first question is from Robert. I did give you the ability to talk if you wanted to add anything, Robert, but let me go ahead and read your question out loud first, and then we can continue. So is there a way to fetch all of the assignments for a case entity that are spread across the multiple states and flows? I've tried using the first flow of the process as the primary flow ID as a fetch criteria, but that doesn't pull anything since all the assignments start in different trigger flows. Any suggestions?
This is in version 8.14 also.
8.14.
So
Okay. I'll keep that in mind if you think that there's something related to that. I do have a case entity in here already that we can use. Check this.
while you're setting it up, pretty much I'll just give background. What I'm trying to
Mhm.
do is create a advanced data grid that can just show all the assignments for this along with another data source. So for that one, it's not a case entity. So I'm able to just pull the primary flow ID and it pulls everything, within that, all the subflows from it. But so I'm just trying to also add this case entities assignments to the same reports, basically. So
Mhm.
I just need to use each individual trigger flows like ID as the primary flow IDs, but
And so you're just specifically just trying to pull the specific assignments that you have in each of these flows, right?
yeah, so I'm using the fetch entity step.
And so I guess like one thing just in general, have you considered like, do the assignment names or anything play into this? Because that's like a really simplistic way. If you know, it kind of requires maybe making some changes, or anything, but like fetching by assignment name is one thing that you can kind of consider. Just because I mean, that's less like obviously like less
Similar, like kind of
specific
having
on
like whatever the
IDs.
process is, just
Yeah.
having it be like
But
the
if
process
all of
name.
your yeah, if all of your assignments related to this case entity are named in a specific way, that's
Yeah,
just
you just
one
said
kind of
okay.
like thing that you can set up ahead of time. That's
Yeah.
definitely like an easy way to guarantee that you're getting, exactly what you want from it.
Okay.
Um, but
That might
obviously
be
if
what I have to go with, but okay.
yeah, but if that's not the case, we can still see what kind of other options maybe we have here. Um, actually, I wonder if this would also achieve any success here. So, because what you can do is in things, you can fetch things in decisions, but you can also
Mhm.
add an extension type. And so it'll only fetch things that are related to that item. And that
Oh,
also
okay.
may help. So, because we do this in our training project where we try to fetch folders that fit under the case entity type. Um, and so we would do this with the first thing that we're fetching is the folder, and the second thing that we're fetching is the case entity itself. And so it actually allows us to fetch data from both items and only things that fall under those categories. That's
Okay.
another thing that may be worth looking at. Um, I've never used these two things in tandem specifically, so I'm not 100% sure how much that achieves, I guess. But like you'll notice here, if I go into fetch criteria, I'll have like all the assignment things, but I also can add fetch criteria for my case entity, which is what these prop 1, 2, and 3 are, like
Okay.
fields that I have on that case entity example. So you can also may be able to utilize information with that. Um, and stuff. So you'll see a lot of these like fields that are related to the case entity instead. That's something that sticks out as well. Let me just remove this. I can see what the assignment options are here. Hmm. There are like these two, like primary flow IDs and flow names. They would have to be
Hmm.
different based on the state. So you would definitely like you would have to consider like doing this. Your input would have to be based on you'd have to be able to pass in like a possible list or something
Yeah.
to
Okay.
check
That was what
through
I
that.
was, yeah. I wasn't sure if that would be best or
Yeah.
because, if there's like, I think there's like 5 or 6 different states. And so I just have to probably pick the top flow ID from those states, as the
Yeah.
primary flow.
Right. And
I think
yeah, you might
the
be able to
first
get something
option you
from that.
suggested might be best then.
Yeah, I think that's not as efficient. Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
I think one of the best things that I think the biggest pieces of advice, it it's easier to say than to do sometimes though,
Yeah.
is to say
Hmm.
like if you can plan or like prepare ahead of time with the way that you name things, the way that you like build some things out, you might be able to um, help that
Yeah, okay. The
to
whole
kind of set
process
that
is
ahead of
still in
time.
development, so it's easy to set up now.
Yeah.
So okay.
Otherwise, then I'm sure there's some other things here and there. Jeremy mentioned that there's other settings on the assignment that you can set to make this easier as well. And I'm sure there are, just maybe it's not as familiar. You want to add what you're thinking, Jeremy? You can
Yeah,
speak
scroll up in that menu there, all the way to the top,
all the time.
about where it says assignment folder type, not specified, change that
Oh yeah, that's right.
to from flow.
Yeah,
And then you can specify the folder ID where those assignments are stored in the portal. So if it's in a case, trigger flow or something, you can grab that folder ID and it'll always be in there. So
yep.
then the folder ID of on the assignment will be your case folder ID.
Okay. Yeah, I
So you
think
can grab
we've
them
done
all
that
that way.
with process folders, and we put all the process folders in the general like process data, main folder. So I think we've done that before. So yeah.
Yeah, that'll just keep them all in the same place, so it's easy to query
Mhm.
just off of the folder that they're saved in.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yep. Great. All right. So probably that's all the questions we've had, but I'm happy to answer some more. I can talk about a couple other things a little bit while we wait, or if we want to. Um, I don't want to jump to ending too early. We have more questions. I'll point out a couple things just in case anyone comes up with anything. Otherwise, maybe it's just a small learning thing for people. Just because I've been working with some stuff recently, and we're going to have a video on this. Um, so there's a pretty neat, um, some neat options that you can actually adjust the visibility of different items in projects, as well as on the system, through data rules and toolbox rules that are kind of interesting and pretty neat to kind of mess around with. So if you go to manage configuration and then under designers, we have these two options for data rules and toolbox rules. And they work kind of like action visibility rules, where it's a rule that you build that can block visibility for certain users or all users or whatever to different actions or different, not actions, sorry, options within the system and decisions. So you can actually block users on the data side from being able to map different categories or not categories, but like fields in a data structure. So you can actually pass in a data structure into a data rule and essentially block users from being able to map specific items within that particular data structure. So you can use any of the decisions ones, you can use ones that you create, but you can actually just block things. You'll see if I add a data rule, it gives me a name, and then I get to choose a data type of any kind. And then whatever data type that is where my rules will apply. So yeah, I've already created an example one in this project called employee structure, which is just a data structure that has just a bunch of random employee like related things, whether or not they're terminated and when they were terminated, their salary, their first and last name, their email address, different things like that. Um, and so email address is the main one. So I actually created a data rule to block email address. So if for some reason you wanted to remove that functionality for someone, you can build this and say, hey, check if the data name equals email address. Now, any flow that I try to build in this project and I try to pull from this employee structure will actually just not have access to the email address field when they're building with it. So I have, just a couple create datas, and this is trying to pull in the employee structure from here. And so if I edit what I want to pass in and I go through my employee data, I have all the regular case entity stuff, and then I hit my defined fields here, but you'll notice email address is actually not one of those options. So I actually don't have the ability to grab email address in this list at all because that data rule blocks it out. So it's an interesting concept that really just allows you to kind of filter out and adjust what different designers and decisions have the ability to see and to use. So you can kind of say, hey, if I want this certain group to just not have access to these things, or maybe I don't want, I just don't want anyone to be messing with these particular data structures or these aspects of a data structure, I can block them out. Or maybe you have, specific groups of people and you want to, prevent those groups of people from being able to, adjust or do something. You can also do that, as well. Right, you have a question? Go ahead. You're still
It
unmuted.
Yeah, is this just in version 9?
No, it's in a different location, version 8. I'll show it in a second. It is, you are able to do it in version 8 as well. Good question. So yeah, in version 9, it's project specific. In version 8, it's system wide. So you'd have to go to the system menu to do it. And you'd have to be a little bit more crafty about your rules, since you can't, if you don't want them to apply to like everything. But under system designers, there's a section called toolbox customization, and it has the same things in it. So they are system wide. So that's the one thing about version 9, since they're focused on the projects, you can actually just do it to one individual project and it won't affect everything else. But you can do the same thing here. You
Is
have the
that also
ability to pick
where
your
we
data
would
types
set
and stuff.
up actual favorites instead of, favoriting them in the catalog?
Yes, you can actually
Okay.
pick these things, and there's a lot more fields than just, right clicking and
The
saying
default
favorite.
ones, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
But yeah, so there's a lot of things in toolbox customization. I obviously just focused on the data rules just now, but there's data samples, which is like sample data that you're building in a flow. If you go to run the debugger and you're using unit tests, especially, you'll probably see sample data. So you can actually set sample data up ahead of time. So if like this is for, I just threw together an account input piece of sample data with like an example account, so that I could use that, in a different part of the process. Um, Another thing that's pretty neat is element rules. So these are similar to the data rules, but they're limitations on the toolbox. So these allow us to actually add limitations so that it blocks out certain uh, items within the toolbox for you to use. So you can actually block out um, various steps and things in a flow. So users don't have access to all the steps. You can block out page and form controls for forms and pages. You can block out verbs as options in the rules, like all kinds of things like that. You can easily adjust and remove certain aspects in the toolbox. So if I go back to my project for an example, in project it's called toolbox rules. In version 9, at least, it's called the element rules on the system. But they're the same thing. So I can easily just build something and say, hey, anything that has the name containing date in it, I want to remove from the toolbox. But you can adjust a lot of things. You can pick it based on the type. So if you want to specify what the type is, you can make sure that you only remove things from flows from the flow toolbox, or only remove them from the form toolbox or something. So that's another thing you can adjust and make sure that it's, like if I just do what I did, what I had already in here, where I remove anything that contains date, it's going to remove any form control, any flow step, any like subflow rule that I've built, verbs, all those things that contain the word date. It'll remove them from all of those designers. If I wanted to make sure I've only removed it from certain designers, I can add a condition with the type and say, but actually, I only want this to be removing the date items related to forms. And so now when I'm building forms, I won't have a date picker, for example, when I'm building out my forms. So it's an interesting way to, again, similarly hide certain things, remove the ability to create certain things, and stuff like that. So you can kind of, adjust to who has the ability to create stuff or utilize different aspects in decisions. Again, both to like declutter how it looks, but you can also consider, let's say I have team A and team B, and I want to make sure that team A isn't able to use team B's items in the toolbox, right? Like if you think about how when you go into a flow, you have the ability to use all items that you've already created. I think it's easier to look this up in one of our training projects because the way that I named things is really good. So if I just pull up a random flow here, and I look through my steps for borrower, you can see here's a list of all these different forms and flows and things that I've created in this project. And I named them in this specific way where I put the word borrower in front of them so that it's easy to find all of these flows. But let's say your team is split up and you have designers that are only building stuff for borrowers and designers that are only building stuff for the loan officers or a different group, right? I could easily create a toolbox that says remove all items from flows that contain the word borrower if you're in group B, right? And so now group B won't be able to access the borrower stuff. they won't see this in their toolbox at all. So it's a great way to kind of limit and say, hey, I don't want someone to accidentally pull the subflow in and start building with it, or trying to use it in something, slightly different way from permissions and things, so that you can easily, you may be very easy to accidentally block permissions or mess up permissions or forget about permissions sometimes. And this is another, additional way to kind of affect that. So definitely really interesting. And in all of these toolbox rules, you have the ability to include the typical flow data options, such as initiating user and stuff like that. So if I added a condition here, I can say it contains date, but only if the initiating users groups is like list of their groups contains the borrower group, right? And so then that'll make sure, okay, now if they're in the borrower group, then they won't see anything that contains the word date. But if they're in any other group, then they will. And it's just a very interesting way that you can adjust those things. Then the last one that I didn't talk about is designer extensions. And so designer extensions is another one that you can actually add additional functionality to the different designers and decisions. And so what it does is it'll actually create the action, whatever action that you build on these things, as an option at the top when you're in your designers. So flow, I've built a flow action called flow action 1. And so if I go into any flow, it's on the system level, so it's available on all my flows. But you actually see that I have that action up here at the top. And so I can actually, build it so that it can do other things for me. So if while I'm building a flow, I want to run this to, run something, create something for me, or add something, check something, whatever that is, I can actually build this up here at the top. And now any flow that I build will have the ability to click on that action and complete something. I just did that for visibility, so I don't actually have a functioning action in here. But you can also add a few other flow ones. So there's ones about flow steps, and then you can also add things for like a flow after a save. So if you save something, it'll run this flow, or before you save, it'll run this flow and maybe like send you a pop-up or remind you of something or whatever, different things like that. So that you can do these kinds of things and have it tell you different things before you save, after you save. When you add a new step, it can, run the process to make, and send to something. The training team did this for a little while. We tried toying around within our training servers, having anytime someone added a step, we checked to see how long they'd been working on a training challenge. And then we would use that to try to assess whether or not someone needed help when they're having difficulty. Is a very complex process, and we have to come back to adjusting it if we want to keep doing it. But different things like that, you can actually have it run flows with different kinds of functionality in flows, forms, pages, all that kind of stuff. So there's some really interesting stuff, but it's kind of hidden, like before version 9, it was just hidden in this designers in the designer folder here on the system. So it's very easy to overlook and not even notice that it's there. And even in version 9, it's still not that much better if you're not aware that it's there, because it's under manage configuration and designers. So quite a few things that you have to expand to figure out where they are to be able to kind of mess around with them a little bit, even just on the project level. But definitely some really interesting concepts there. Things maybe worth toying around with to adjust visibility and what kind of options different people have or your designer team may have when they're building in decisions. So looks like we still don't have any other questions. We've been going for 25 minutes, so I think we'll just go ahead and end it there. Thank you for listening. Thank you all for listening to me ramble about some toolbox customization options. Thank you, Robert, for your question and Jeremy for the assist. We will go ahead and end this for now, and we will continue. We'll continue the rest of this week. We've got Gregory, and then myself will be back again on Wednesday and Thursday, leading our Lunch and Learns. So thank you all for joining, and we will see hopefully everyone again in the coming days.